Hey, what's up, guys? Your agent Tyler Wehrung, and today we're going to talk about a word that's thrown all around by real estate agents, mortgage companies, and title companies. I think smart people sometimes pick confusing sounding words for very simple things just to make themselves feel better. Not sure if that's the case here, but I do know a lot of people get confused about the term escrow. So I'm going to talk to you guys about what escrow is, when it typically comes up in conversations, why that matters to you, and some other thoughts to consider. So with that, let's jump in. Alright guys, so essentially escrow just means there's a third party involved who's acting on behalf of both of the other two parties' best interests. So I know that's still not a very simple definition, but let's talk through the most common example of when escrow is mentioned and when it's important. Alright, so when you buy a house and you have a mortgage on the property, typically your mortgage is going to include your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. If you're in an HOA, it could include that payment as well. And if you do have PMI or MIP, that will also be included. So those are all the things that kind of roll up to the sum total of your mortgage payment. And when you're going through the home buying process, your loan officer will give you all that information. But where escrow comes in place is your taxes and insurance payments are typically paid out of an escrow account. Now, a lot of times this happens behind the scenes. Most people have no idea that they're even paying into an escrow account, and then that escrow account is also making payments on their behalf. And frankly, you don't necessarily need to know, but this is essentially in place so you don't have to make one payment to the bank just for your principal and interest, another payment to your city for property taxes, another payment to your insurance company for your insurance on the property, and another payment for MIP or PMI. So instead of doing all that, what the bank does that typically your mortgage servicer, you pay them the lump sum, they carve out the taxes and insurance and put that in a safe account for you every month and let that build up until typically that's paid twice a year or annually, and they make that payment on your behalf. They do this for the first reason, like I mentioned, simplicity, but the second reason, like all financial institutions are looking out for their best interest, they know that if they require you to make that full mortgage payment and now they're in control of paying taxes and insurance on your behalf, that takes a lot of risk off of their plate. Alright, so if you are responsible for making those payments individually, we all know how some people don't manage money as great as they should, or sometimes people are forgetful. So what if you forget to pay your property tax bill, or you frankly just decide not to do that? So the property tax is the highest form of lien, and they could file a lien against your property that would be a position ahead of the bank's mortgage. So the bank obviously doesn't want that to happen. They want to be in the number one lien position. So they are taking responsibility of making sure that doesn't happen by taking care of your property taxes. And they also include insurance, because if you don't pay your insurance, you have a lapse and then something horrible happens and your house burns to the ground, the bank is on the line for still that whole balance. So they want to make sure that they are protected, and so they take care of making sure that tax and insurance payment is paid on time, promptly, and that their financial interest is covered in this event. Alright, and so why I think you do need to be aware of this, and where I see a lot of folks get themselves in trouble, is when they're going to buy a home. They do their due diligence, they have a monthly budget in mind that they can spend on a mortgage payment. And let's say their payment's $1,000 a month. So they go out to Google, find a mortgage calculator, and play with the numbers until they get their principal and interest payment to $1,000 a month. Then they have whatever number that is that gets them there, and they say, okay, this is the amount of house I can afford. Well, you just left two big pieces out of that equation in taxes and insurance, and that will likely bump your payment up another couple $100 at least. So you want to make sure in the very beginning that when you're figuring out how much you can afford, that you definitely want to include taxes and insurance and make sure you don't leave that piece out. Alright, so the other area that escrow comes into play is in the home buying process. So let's say you go out and find a home that you want to submit an offer on, and you submit an earnest money check. So typically that goes to a title office or your agent's brokerage account. Alright, so in that case, whoever that goes to, that money is in escrow, which gives you some protection. Alright, you don't want to go out and write a check and hand it right to the seller in the case that you guys come to some dispute and have a falling out, and now they have your money and they think it should be theirs. Obviously you want it back, so you want a third party involved, and so this does provide a value to both parties in this situation. So the other term that you might hear about if you hang out with real estate agents, or your agent may bring it up in conversation, is that they have a deal in escrow or a contract in escrow. Really, that just means it's in the closing process. It hasn't closed yet, and that's a very common language for real estate agents to use. So I hope that was helpful, guys, to at least give you kind of the different terminologies of why I think it's important that you do need to be aware of it. I think it's always important to know where your money's going, but in this situation, it's really important on the front end so you don't get yourself into trouble. The last piece I'll leave you with is this. If you're in that first situation where you're making monthly payments and then you have a separate escrow account, sometimes that account will go up. Let's say they underestimated what you owed for property taxes and insurance. Now you might see your mortgage payment go up slightly to account for that the next year. Or let's say you overpaid. You gave them too much money for escrow that year. You'll potentially get a check back for the difference, or they may just adjust it going forward and include that there. So you always want to keep tabs on that and check out your mortgage statements and understand kind of when they're making those payments, what your account balance looks like if you truly want to understand it. But this is one of those situations, once it's locked in place, most people set it and forget it, and there's really no harm, no foul here. It's really important on the front end. So guys, if this was helpful at all, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe as always. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below, and we'll catch you next time.